the term CEO is often connected to people who are usually high functioning, have a lot on their plate, always working a lot, doing a lot, and
who also tend to be anxious, burnout, and slightly neurotic. Yes,
absolutely, absolutely. And what it describes, what you're describing to me, is a really incredible tool to try and say, hey, how do I stay healthy amidst the insanity that their job is? Before we hop into this episode, I wanted to give you a reason why we're having this conversation, because this is a different one than we normally have on the Cincinnati Business Podcast. When you are going through your normal day, there are a lot of challenges that you may face. And as a business person, as a CEO, as a entrepreneur, there are a lot of things that will keep us away from our tip-top shape. So I talked today with Dr. Teresa Anderson, and she is using a new system that actually allows you to be able to tune your brain. I know that sounds really crazy, but basically she can do all this amazing stuff, seeing where there are problems inside of your brain and help you get to peak performance. So the reason I wanted to sit down with her, it was to allow you guys to experience another form of what may be coming in the world of medical science that you can eventually use to help get yourself to the peak level of performance that you need. All right, let's get to the episode. Welcome to the Cincinnati Business Podcast, where we give you practical tips and tricks to grow yourself and your business. And brought to you by the Cincinnati Podcast Studio. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Cincinnati Business Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Erickson, and with me today, I've got a guest who's talking about some things that almost feel like they're slightly out of sci-fi. I don't know. When I first heard about this, it kind of blew me away that this is even possible. And in some ways, I was like, well, why isn't everybody talking about this? So today with me, I've got Dr. Teresa Anderson. You're an interventional psychiatrist. You got some insane credentials and some really cool stuff that you're doing, but we're going to get into all of that. But I just want to say thank you. Welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I'm really excited to talk about this with you because when you and I first chatted about what we wanted to talk about today, you used the phrase, you can tune your brain. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Oh my gosh. So I was really excited to be able to have this conversation with you because this is not only for people who are suffering with an affliction of some sort, it's also for people who are just trying to better themselves.
Absolutely.
So the treatment is called PR-TMS, correct?
Correct.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to dig into all that sort of stuff, the craziness there. But I want to start first with what got you into the world of psychiatry to begin with?
Do you want the long story or the short story?
I don't care. Give it to me how you want it.
So one of my mentors growing up was a family practice doc, and my mom was sick a lot. She had a lot of autoimmune diseases. And so I was probably in that office with her probably once a week. And so every time we visited, he would probably give me like a model or a book and then quiz me the next time. And he was a crotchety old dude and hated pretty much everyone but me. But I loved him to pieces. And I thought, wow, he's so smart. I want to be smart like him someday. So like from the time I was 8 years old, I wanted to be a doctor. But I tend to be very literary and I love people's stories. And when we passed through the VA in one of our rotations, I fell in love with the veterans, like especially those suffering with PTSD or post-traumatic stress. When I realized that these people were suffering from things that had happened 20, 30, 40 years ago. And it wasn't the trauma that nearly killed them. It was the stories they were telling themselves about the trauma that was killing them. It's what they were identifying themselves as, right? This happened. I should have been faster. It should have been me. It should have been this. It should have been that. Ooh. And therefore, ... I am a bad person, or I am a loser, or I am a villain. Absolutely. Shame statements. And so working with them and seeing how their lives could turn around when they started reframing, and we would tell them, look, the goal isn't to be Pollyanna, right? We're like, oh, sunshine and daisies everywhere. It's not feasible. But just to even get to a neutral statement, right? To think of, what if? Is there a possibility that maybe it was an accident? Is there a possibility that I was in the wrong place at the wrong time? Because bad things happen to good and bad people alike, right? And so if you can reframe it as maybe it was an accident, maybe this bad thing happened and it has nothing to do with who I am as a person. So we're up to neutral. You think it in terms of temperature scales, right? We went from negative to neutral. Well, that's just a step away from positive. So they could open up the possibility that they could be different. And I'm going to get a little nerdy here, but if you think about Star Wars, right? Obi-Wan said, your focus determines your reality. And that was the filter through which they were seeing themselves and their lives, right? And so if you see the world through crap-colored glasses, everything looks brown. And so if they start seeing themselves in a more neutral light, then that opens themselves up to the possibility that maybe I was wrong about other things too.
Interesting. And so that was kind of your kind of moment when you started to realize like, oh, I really like this work of working with patients with PTSD and other things like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Interesting. So then you go through all your rotations, you did your time at the VA, and then did you just right out of all those rotations go build your own practice, or how did that work for you?
So I was at University of Cincinnati for residency training for adult psychiatry, and I was the chief resident there. So I'd moonlighted in like the ER the last 2 years, and they knew me, right? And so I'd planned on sort of doing shifts in the psychiatric emergency room while I was building my private practice. And when I did my exit interview, the leadership there was like, so we're hoping that you're going to stay on with us, even part-time. We'd love to have you. We know you do good work and all this. And I said, well, my plan is to do some shifts now and again to kind of support me doing private practice. And they were like, well, you know, you can't really put money on the table for your family doing that. You can't put food on the table for your family. And something just in me just snapped and said, watch me. So that made me even more determined to kind of go out and do it and like not work for the man. So yeah, that's kind of how that started. I'm a little rebellious.
Well, that's interesting. Now, one of the things that I've seen is there have been so many people who have gone into medicine and then started their own practice. How did you even know what you were doing? Did they train you in some way in how to do business?
Not at all. It was like reinventing the wheel every few months, for God's sakes. There are a lot of faux pas. There are a lot of missteps. And I think that's true to form for any entrepreneur, really, right? I lucked out in that when I first joined a practice, it was a group practice, and all of the individuals were very talented and very well known in the field, and just solid members of the community. And they acted as friends, mentors, and supervisors while I was getting on my feet. And so having them around, and shout out to 820 Delta Mount Lookout, having them around was really helpful, just to kind of foster that, hey, you can do this, and no, maybe that's not the best way to do it, or hey, you can do it this way, you can try it, and it's probably not going to work. So it's one of those where it was really helpful to have mentors along the way. Man, but I've been taking business classes like ever since, helpful. And like anything that I can improve, like leadership or business models or entrepreneurial stuff. And I'm currently hooked into this group called EntreMD, so entrepreneurial doctors that are trying to do the private practice model outside the hospital because they're kind of a dying breed. So yeah, but it's so easy to do wrong too. Cool. Oh my gosh, so easy, so easy. Yeah.
So while you were getting all this rolling, what would you say is one of the biggest mistakes that you learned from while you were trying to get your practice off the ground?
It's more of having to get over the hurdle of a negative mindset.
Okay.
It wasn't necessarily like a misstep in business per se, but more getting over the hurdle of having everybody and their brother saying you can't do it. And you thinking, well, maybe I can, but that voice is like this small compared to the rest of all the other voices around you. So I think more than anything, just getting over the negative mindset of, if this is what I'm doing, then I have to make it work. And if that's the filter through which you see things, by God, you will find a way to make it work.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh.
So, yeah.
Well, when I talk to all these entrepreneurs who have built thriving businesses, one of the things that I often hear from them was this kind of concept of like, I never believed I couldn't do it. Like, I had to believe that that this would work. Like, it was either they had to take care of their family, they had to feed themselves, they had to or there are some of those who are out there that are like, if I didn't do this, I could never be happy with what I was doing.
Absolutely. And I lucked out in the regards I had the coolest mom ever. And she was like my biggest cheerleader. And she literally brainwashed me from an early age saying, when you go to college, not if you go to college, because I was from a very small town. And, but she was always like, you can always do whatever you put your mind to. And whenever I asked for help with something, she would give me her opinion on it, but then she wouldn't like point me in a direction. She goes, you'll figure it out. I'm like, oh, I hate that. Why won't you just tell me? She's like, because I'm not you. I can't live your life. I don't know what's right for you. And that was the biggest gift because it fostered a sense of independence and fostered a sense of, even crap does hit the fan. I got this. I can do it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Well, that's a nice reframing of what could have been a resentment in that moment.
Yeah, well, I would say there's like a little bit of bitterness to everyone every now and again, but she knew what she was doing. She was like, no, you got this. You'll figure it out. And guess what? I did because I had to.
Yeah. So now you've moved into a lot of very specialty work. Mm-hmm. There's obviously the one thing that you and I had touched on that we weren't going to dig in too much, but is you were using ketamine to try and help people with PTSD.
Absolutely.
Which I think is super fascinating, but also it kind of has a bit of a bad name, right? Like you were saying there was some sort of celebrity incident that happened with ketamine. What was that?
I don't want to get into it for like legal reasons, but like in terms of there was a person who had overdosed on it, but it was being used very inappropriately. And so under medical supervision, under the right circumstances, and as long as you don't have any contraindications to the medication, and it's very well tolerated and is very safe under medical supervision. I want to stress under medical supervision.
Yes, 100%.
Not using it on your own.
What are you guys finding that is helping the most with treating right now?
So ketamine, intravenous ketamine is excellent in terms of folks who have a very acutely ill presentation. So if someone was treatment-resistant depression and was acutely suicidal, and it's like either this or the hospital, it's a great kind of way to sort of lift you out of the abyss and do the soft reset. Part of the hell of depression is being able to see all the things on the horizon that you should be doing, but you can't make yourself do it. And so ketamine is sort of like it lifts you up long enough to be able to say, okay, I can do this, this, and this. And when you start doing those things, those positive behaviors then reinforce the positive neurochemistry in your brain.
That's so fascinating.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
But it is short-lived. So sometimes it lasts for a month, sometimes it lasts for a few months. And so people need re-ups on boosters and things like that. But right now, I think by far the coolest thing that we're doing is PR-TMS.
Which I want to go right into because my goodness, this is so fascinating to me. Okay, so I want to get into where you found out about this, but TMS as a system has been around for a while.
Mid-'80s, I think.
Mid-'80s, yeah. So can you explain what that is and then how that then has morphed into what you are doing now with PR-TMS?
Sure. So TMS stands for Transcranial Magnetic Stimulation. And so originally it was sort of a kinder, gentler version of ECT or electroconvulsive therapy.
Which has a bit of a rough name when people think about it.
Yeah. So people think of shock therapy and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, right?
Yeah.
And so, but it's been the gold standard for 50 plus years when folks who had treatment resistant depression weren't responding to the standard oral antidepressant regimen. So, but it has its drawbacks in that, you have to be hospitalized, sedated, intubated. They put sensors on your temporal lobes bilaterally and essentially shock you. They make you have a seizure. And so you're away from work. You're out of it for a bit. You might have some short-term memory loss that may or may not come back. And so, yes, it worked, but at what cost, right?
Yeah.
So TMS was a kinder, gentler version of that in that the idea is we're placing a magnet on the brain and creating a magnetic field around the skull. And magnetic fields can pass through anything. And so you don't have to sort of crank up the juice necessarily. They're passing through your skull and they're turning into electrical energy. And so what the standard TMS was doing, it was treating folks at the average human alpha wave. And so we have different speeds of waves, and we'll get into that in a minute. But the alpha wave is sort of like your resting, zen, meditative, contemplative state. You're awake and alert, but your eyes are closed and you're not moving and you're not talking. So standard like meditation state, right? And so when it treats at the alpha wave, it's treating at a standard of the human adult average, which is 10 hertz. Hertz is a frequency. That means you are sampling the world around you with all of your senses 10 times a second.
Mm-hmm. But
what happens if your frequency or your internal processing speed isn't at 10? What if it's 11.5? Might actually be slowing things down. What if it's at 8.9? You may never get to 10, right? And so that's why it works only about a third of the time. Mm-hmm. People say, oh, well, 1.5, that isn't off too far, right? Well, I wear a size 7.5 shoe. If you made me wear a size 6, we'd have to have words, right?
And I believe you mentioned this is like an order of magnitude.
It is an order of magnitude. So yeah, when you talk about going from 10 to 9 hertz in speed or frequency, you're essentially talking about a power of 10. And so we start worrying about folks who have any speed of brain below 8 hertz because you put yourself at risk for dementing illnesses like Alzheimer's, right? And so if you're looking at average Joe with 10 hertz alpha wave and you step down to 9, that's 10 times slower. You step down to 8, that's 100 times slower. It's not 2, it's 100 times slower than the person at 10 hertz. And so it makes a big deal.
Now, when I'm thinking about this, there are common diagnoses that you mentioned to me that are often associated with impaired function like that. So what are those that are usually diagnosed in somebody that may just actually be brain operating at a different speed?
So sometimes folks on the autism spectrum might be at a slower speed, folks with learning disabilities. If you are actively using drugs or alcohol, anything that's what we call a central nervous system depressant. So alcohol, benzodiazepines like Klonopin, Valium, Ativan, Xanax, opioid, narcotic painkillers. If you'd been in a car accident or recovering from a surgery, doctor might prescribe you Lortab, right? That sort of thing would slow down your brain. Concussions slow down your brain.
Okay.
Traumatic brain injury, stroke.
Okay, so to recap, TRMS or TMS.
TMS only treats treatment-resistant depression and is also FDA approved for OCD and migraines.
Okay. But that is one thing that treats the whole brain.
Correct.
All at the same time, assuming you have the standard
average 10 hertz alpha wave.
Okay. Yes. So PR-TMS goes way further.
Yeah.
So talk us through that.
So we actually do an EEG in-house, and that tells us several things. One is, how fast is your speed? Okay. So what is your computer's internal processing speed? Okay. So we're going to target that speed with the machine. That's the first thing. The second thing is, are you producing that same speed from back to front? Say you fell out of a tree when you were 10, right? Maybe the back part of your brain is going 10, but the front part of your brain is going 8. And so when you're a kid, you can't pay attention. You can't remember things. You can't be focused and on task. And so what do doctors do? Well, we'll diagnose you with ADHD and give you a stimulant, of course. And so when you take that medication, it doesn't go to one spot. It goes globally to the brain. And so the front part of your brain is like, yes, I can think again. And the back part of your brain, that's already going the normal speed, is going, what the crap are you doing? And you get anxious and angry and agitated. And suddenly it makes so much sense of all my folks that were like, yeah, they've thrown every medication at the book at me and I haven't responded to anything. And we get an EEG and I'm like, oh, you have a history of a concussion. What? And when you like trace back the time, they're like, oh yeah, there was that one time when I was in cheerleading camp and that dude like flipped me on my head. I'm like, that'd do it.
Wow.
Almost always when folks aren't responding. No, not all the time, but like a good 90% of the time when folks aren't responding to medications, it's because they've had a history of head trauma and don't even realize it. The brain is like unset jello, right? And so we don't actually have to have a blow directly to the head to make a difference to cause a concussion. You know, you can fall from a horse as an equestrian, fall on your bottom and shake hard enough, right? You can get T-boned in a car.
Yep.
Your head doesn't have to go through the windshield, but you go from 60 miles an hour to 0 instantaneously, you're going to have a concussion.
Yeah.
And so I think it's one of the most widely underdiagnosed problems that we're facing because you can have 0 history of mental health before obtaining a concussion and then be anxious and depressed and can't sleep and can't think. Cognition slowed. You could have depression and anxiety and then get a concussion. It makes it all worse.
So what you do with PR-TMS is you basically then target those magnetic waves to the issues in the brain that you see with the EEG.
Absolutely. So we do a couple things. So we get the history on a person, see what medications they've tried and failed. What have they been diagnosed with in the past, and does it still make sense, right? We get their EEG, and we see, one, are they able to produce an alpha wave? Because some people can't. If they're so anxious, they can't like slow down to just think of one thing. And so, or they had a stroke and they can't, but we see, are they producing an alpha wave? Is it one that's coherent from back to front? And if not, why? And is it faster or slower? Is it about on target? And also, is there noise in different areas of the brain? Because we've seen patterns over time that are actually consistent with different diagnoses.
Interesting.
Isn't that wild?
Okay, walk me through that.
Okay, so for years, we have sort of tailored our medication to what diagnoses people have, right? We do a clinical interview, sometimes formal testing, say, okay, yeah, you have treatment-resistant depression. You've been ruled out for not having a low thyroid. You're not anemic. You're straight up depression. Based off of your symptoms, I'm going to give you XYZ drug, right? And so with this, we can actually look at a person's brain and how it's functioning, how it's producing an alpha wave or not. Look at the noise and say, you kind of look like you have ADHD. You ever have problems focusing? And because that's not what they're here for, right? They're here for the depression. Yeah. But it's like, oh, well, if you look on the EEG, the 2 frontal lobe leads are turned off. And that's our executive functioning, our attention, concentration, short-term memory, decision-making. And then the reading comprehension area is turned off. Oh yeah, I read the same page like 8 times and like get distracted and check on my phone, and like all of these things sort of make sense. Or you see, alternatively, you see somebody who had a concussion and then developed sort of ADHD-like symptoms, but they have an extra wave that shouldn't be there, that's slowed down. Sort of like when you're a runner and you tweak your knee and you can't go as fast as you used to.
Start limping, yeah.
Exactly. And so we see maybe part of their brain is going that healthy speed and another part of the brain is going way slower.
So a lot of these external factors that we're seeing in people, like depression, like anxiety, like anger, frustration, those sort of things, can often be because the brain is recognizing it's not communicating the way it wants to.
How would you feel, like emotionally, if somebody locked you in a car and turned on 4 different radio stations?
I would go mad.
Right? Yeah. It might produce some anxiety, right? Would you be able to think clearly if somebody was talking? I'm talking to you. Can you listen? Like what, who, where, like you don't know what to pay attention to, right?
Yeah.
And that's your brain trying to go 4 different frequencies. Like listening to 4 different radio stations at one time. Your favorite song may be on your favorite station, but you can't make sense of it because it's a cacophony.
Interesting. So one of the hardest parts about podcasting is the moment you stop talking. I mean, think about it. The majority of the work that you probably put into creating a podcast is in the editing phase. So what if you didn't have to do the editing phase? Here at the Cincinnati Podcast Studio, we help you just come in and talk. We do all the rest. We have the cameras, we have the microphones, we have the lights, and then we have the editing tools to create the perfect content out of your podcast. Not only do you get the full podcast in video and audio, you also get short form content that you can use across all of your pages in social media. So if you want to learn more, go to CincinnatiPodcastStudio.com/tour to learn more and schedule your tour with us today. So people are coming in thinking, hey, I've got depression, I've got something like this. And you say, hey, let's try something. And you say, let's get this EEG. Let's take a look at your head. Let's figure out like if we can see some of these signs that I think I might see. So then they come to you and you notice this, you see, hey, there's this dip in the brain. What does treatment look like then?
So standard treatment, if you're coming in and all symptoms point to like treatment-resistant depression, and we do an EEG and it looks like treatment-resistant depression and that's it, is very similar to what standard TMS is, which is like 6 weeks, Monday through Friday, daily, 30 minutes. And we sit you down and we put the magnet on your head and it clicks for like 30 minutes and you kind of go into this Zen meditative state, close your eyes, go to your happy place. It's very non-invasive, very low side effect profile. You might get a headache or might feel like you have studied for an exam for several days really hard because we're literally working out your neurons, right? And it would be about 6 weeks or so. But what we do is we repeat that EEG every week. And we repeat neurocognitive exams based on what your symptoms are presenting like. So if I know for certain that you have a concussion, we're going to give you a concussion exam. If I know for certain that you have ADHD, I'm going to give you one of those. Everybody gets a depression, anxiety, and sleep screening because it's so common. And then in addition to that, we'll also add autism spectrum stuff or OCD or whatever. And so each week we'll take those sort of measurements and repeat the EEG because sometimes subjectively, especially when you're like a deep, dark depression, you can't see the forest for the trees, right? You can't see improvements in yourself, but your brain is showing improvements or your numbers are showing improvements. And so we don't live and die by the EEG. We kind of look at it as a brain vital sign. Mm-hmm. If you came to my office and you were running late, you're like, oh my God, Dr. Anderson, I'm late. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And we took your blood pressure.
Oh yeah.
It would likely be elevated, right?
Yeah.
Does that mean you have hypertension?
No.
Not necessarily. But if every time you came to my office and we took your blood pressure and regardless of what emotional state you were in, it was elevated, you probably do have hypertension. And so it's patterns over time. So from 1 week to the next, the EEG might look like paint drying, right? But sometimes like in the third or the fourth one, we'll say, ooh, look, our frontal lobes are turning on, or look, this concussion wave is calming down and it's kind of moving over and giving energy to the healthy alpha wave. And it's really cool.
Okay. So we've been talking about the details for a while now.
Yes.
But I'm curious about the results.
Yes.
Like what are you seeing in patients that are doing this? And the hard thing here too is like, obviously this is the Cincinnati Business Podcast.
Sure.
We're trying to understand like, how can we help people in business be a better version of themselves?
Absolutely.
And so while we're talking about a lot of people who are struggling with depression or ADHD or other things like that, this can help anyone.
Yeah.
So talk me through the benefits. And I know that you were talking about the guy who kind of started this in the US, if I remember correctly, had a kid who was on the autism spectrum as well. And it helped him a lot. So walk me through the benefits of this.
Yeah. So it's a whole brain treatment, regardless of what you have going on. If your brain is coherent and doesn't have a lot of noise, it's a happy brain, regardless of what you have going on. Mm-hmm. And so it can treat so much more than just depression because we can sort of pinpoint your healthy alpha wave, what speed you're going and how you need to be treated. It's sort of like going to the gym and only working out your right bicep 24/7. What has to get bigger? Right bicep, right? And so when we reinforce that alpha wave, it makes the noise sort of calm down and go away. So we've seen, and different issues have improved with a different amount of efficacy. And so Dr. Murphy's group out in Hawaii did a study on concussion because apparently if you surf a lot, you get a lot of concussions. In 6 weeks, they showed a 60% improvement in concussion scores.
Whoa.
So previous to now, I mean, it's just been, avoid video games, avoid bright lights, avoid loud sounds, and just rest. Okay, how long is that going to take? Maybe.
And hope you get better.
And hope. Yeah, cross your fingers and knock on wood. His group in, I believe it's Texas, did a retrospective comparison study with a cohort of VA veterans who did standard TMS for 6 weeks. They had PTSD. They dropped their trauma scores by 22% with a standard TMS. Yay.
Yeah.
Different group, VA veterans with trauma, PR-TMS dropped about 88.
Whoa.
Let me say that again, 88.
Yeah.
88%. It's like unheard of. For the most part, when we prescribe medications, they only work about a third of the time.
Whoa.
That's a really depressing statistic, right? Yeah.
For depression meds, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So Dr. Murphy's own son happens to be on the spectrum, and he treated him, his clinic treated him over time, and he is now a functioning young adult. I mean, he went from being sort of asked not to return to school because of behavioral outbursts to now like studying for his degree at university.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. So for depression and anxiety, we've seen more of like a 70 to 80% improvement of symptoms, which is still twice as much as oral medication, right? Now there's still a lot to unpack, and this isn't a be all end all. It's not like a panacea, but it's a tool. And it's a very useful tool, and it's a very efficacious tool. And
it's something that can get you high enough so you can see where you're at and then keep yourself moving forward.
Exactly. And say, for instance, you have PTSD. This might get you functional and reduce your symptom burden enough so that you can go to therapy and talk about the things that you need to talk about, right?
Yeah.
And so we absolutely encourage people to continue, being followed by their physician or doctor. If we're not covering them, that somebody else is, that they continue therapy if they're not seeing us. But this can help all of those things and improve functionality as well. So, I mean, that's kind of the goal, right?
Yeah. So then you were telling me then it also helps. Go ahead.
And I also, I forgot to say, so CEOs and business people have been using this as sort of like a brain tuning, like hand-eye coordination and cognitively to improve things. We've seen improvement in like Navy SEAL sharpshooters, like improvement, like, and those guys, have trauma and, have probably been near concussion blasts before easily. Yeah. And just in 2 short weeks improve like their marksmanship. So it's all to do with how the brain is functioning with the rest of the physical body too. So
yeah. I feel like the term CEO is often connected to people who are usually high functioning, have a lot on their plate, always working a lot, doing a lot. And
who also tend to be anxious, burnout, and slightly neurotic. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what it describes, what you're describing to me is a really incredible tool to try and say, hey, how do I stay healthy amidst the insanity that their job is?
Yeah. And it's like, so PR-TMS is like a forced meditation. Like I'm one of those people with a very busy brain. And so if I close my eyes long enough, I will fall asleep. If you don't put something on my plate in front of me to do, I will fall asleep. And so to have that to like say, okay, it's time to quiet your brain down. And we were thinking about this and we're just like, people frequently leave feeling like they've like had a day at this podcast. It's like, oh, it's very calming because it forces you into that peaceful state.
Yeah.
We're essentially tuning your brain's engine idle. Right? If you're at a stoplight and your engine's like, it's obviously not tuned, right? It's losing a lot of energy out. It's dissipating as heat in the environment, as opposed to the energy that takes the momentum and propels you forward. And in the same way, we have that going on too. And so if we can tune our brains, we're going to keep ourselves healthier. And we see folks who meditate, who exercise regularly, especially the exercise that involves all 4 limbs, like, swimming, anything that's rhythmic, or like cross-country skiers or people who use elliptical a lot, they have a really strong alpha wave because they've forced themselves into that and they've practiced it over and over and over again. Right. And so as we age,
isn't that why they say that, like, if you go out for a walk when you're trying to think through something, if your arms are swinging, it helps connect your brain up and just think better.
Improves the connectivity between left and right hemispheres. But as we age, very sadly, we lose brain volume. And most of us, like as I'm sitting here drinking coffee, are in a mildly dehydrated state chronically. And that reduces brain volume. And so we slow down as we age. Over the age of 40, every decade over the age of 40, we actually slow down by 1/3 to 1/2 a hertz. So if you start faster, you are in a much better position, even if you have dementing illnesses in your family, to kind of stay above that dementia line.
Well, speaking of dementia, like I've heard you mention something like this can be it's not a cure, it's a stay almost of dementia a little bit.
It can help slow the progression a bit. So nothing is going to keep those proteins from being laid down until we figure out genetically how to change that, right? But a lot of times too, you have comorbid illnesses of depression and anxiety that come with the memory loss. People are freaking out. I can't remember your name. I know you. What's the guy with the beard's name? That.
Yeah.
And so that can help sort of slow that down a little bit, and it can reinforce whatever remaining brain function they have. But again, it's not a panacea.
No.
Yeah. And it would take a lot longer term treatment. So for some people, it's not worth the investment.
Yeah, that makes sense. So is this something that you need to be prescribed by a doctor to be able to get involved in? Or is this something that someone can just come to you and say, I think I need some help?
Anybody can come to me if they feel like their brain is slowing down, or they feel like they've tried every medication in the book and they don't know what's wrong. I am the only practitioner in the state of Ohio or Kentucky that does this. I think there are 2 in Indiana. So in the nearby vicinity, I'd be the only game in town. So, but yeah, anybody can come. They wouldn't have to be referred by a neurologist or be referred by another psychiatrist or even their PCP. If you hear the podcast, you're welcome to give us a call. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So then is this covered by insurance normally, or is this a private, like you fund it yourself style thing?
Oh, insurance. Okay. So
it's the question on everyone's mind.
So if you carry a diagnosis of treatment-resistant depression and you've tried and failed at least 3 antidepressant agents, frequently insurance will play ball and cover some, if not all, the cost of 36 treatments. Now, that being said, different insurances, some require you to pay up front and then be reimbursed on the back end. Some give you a copay, or some like pay out of pocket maximum or count towards your deductible or whatever. If it's not under that umbrella of depression, unfortunately, it is self-pay.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, a whole swath of the world of psychiatry and counseling and all that is not covered.
Absolutely.
So that totally makes sense.
And insurance companies are mainly about hedging their bets to see if you're going to get sick instead of preventive care. Don't get me started. I could do a whole another 3 podcasts on that one. Oh my.
Oh, well, that makes that's so interesting for me, because when I think about this treatment, like, there are so many things out there that you see on social media or in the blogosphere or whatever that talks about, like, here's the things to try and help your brain work better, or here's the practice that I do every single day to try and help, and that sort of thing. But it sounds like this is proven and really working.
And scientifically backed, yeah.
And scientifically backed. That's helpful.
Yeah, not just, let's just put mercury in the water. No, what are you doing? What are you like? What is this? Yeah, no, it's, yeah.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that I thought was really interesting that you told me earlier was, like, those times when you walk into a room and forgot why you were walking into it, or someone told you something and 30 seconds later you walk away like, what was that I was supposed to remember?
Yeah.
This actually helps with that.
Yeah.
Which I think is just really unique. Really unique.
Something interesting too, that, you do what you can with what you have, and when you know better, you do better. That's my Angelou quote, right? And so I wish I would have known early in my career how much fight or flight plays a part in patients who have PTSD, from getting the help that they need, from being able to digest the materials that you give them, from being able to internalize what you're sharing, because they're in such a heightened state and their nervous system is on overdrive, right? It's like this one goes to 11, right? Like, it's cranked and then the knob is broken off.
Let's see what this does.
Exactly. And so when you have somebody who is in a chronically panicked state, they can't hear you when you're trying to help them. Mm-hmm. I tell people all the time, nobody cares what's for dinner if you're being chased by a bear. Who cares about the future 10 minutes from now? I want to make sure I survive this moment right here, right now. And so the lovely thing about reinforcing one's alpha wave is it turns down that fight or flight. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, things that were scary aren't so hairy scary anymore. And while they might be anxiety inducing, your anxiety level isn't near panic state anymore. And so we can tolerate a bump in anxiety because your baseline's so much lower.
Yeah. Well, so then here's a question for you. I work with a lot of guys who are doing 12-step work.
Sure.
So I help lead a bunch of guys through a 12-step group. And one of the things that we often talk about in these spaces is the fight or flight response.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Where most of the guys who are stuck in addiction, they don't recognize, but they are stuck in fight or flight a lot.
For sure.
For a good portion of their life. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we recognize when we're taking guys through this is it takes years sometimes for them to even get to the point where they're not fighting every single day.
Or calm down enough to even recognize they need help.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, luckily, a lot of the guys that are in that group have calmed down a lot to the point, or have been forced to the point that they need to be in that space.
Sure.
But I'm curious, like, for people with addictions and struggling in that space, how does this help them? Like, does it provide, I don't want to say a shortcut, but like a way to be able to give themselves peace.
Yeah, a tool to help for sure.
Yeah.
So we've seen good results in folks who have gambling addictions. We've seen good results in folks who have opioid addictions. We've brought people down off of Suboxone, which is sort of like the long-term treatment for getting off of opioids, right? We brought them off Suboxone without any withdrawal.
Whoa.
Like, I know it's unheard of, right? and we're stimulating those areas of the brain that are yelling at you, craving the substance, right? We haven't done a lot of work with eating disorders. We haven't done a lot of work with sex addiction. We haven't had as good a luck with folks who have alcohol problems. I don't know why that is, but it's not my specialty. Like addictions aren't my specialty.
Yeah.
And so we haven't seen a large number of them. Yeah. So people come to me, typically depression, anxiety, PTSD, right?
Yeah.
And then few concussions, stroke survivors, a few of those thrown in. And every once in a while you'll have somebody who's self-medicating with alcohol or self-medicating with opioids or whatever. And so it's kind of like the periphery of what I do.
Yeah.
But we've seen good results with folks who have opioids and gambling addiction, just less so with alcohol.
Interesting. Okay. So now I'm curious. What have I not asked you yet that I should? Because I don't know this technology, this new treatment that you know so well.
So here's the cool thing about PR-TMS. So in standard TMS, you can't have a seizure disorder because it could induce seizures. In PR-TMS, we use a lower amplitude because we're honing in on the person's exact frequency. We don't have to crank the amplitude all the way up. So we can treat right over the motor strip without fear of inducing a seizure. So it's safe in people with seizures.
Ooh.
In standard TMS, you can't treat pregnant people. In PR-TMS, you can.
Wait, you can't. Interesting. Why is it dangerous with standard TMS?
Well, they don't know, and they of course don't want to do any sort of study on that because ethically it's sort of gray.
Yeah.
It's
scary. Yeah.
But again, the field which we are producing is about 3 centimeters, and so it's not going down here.
Interesting.
Yeah. In other forms of treatment, like ketamine, you couldn't be taking high-dose benzodiazepines, high-dose narcotics. You shouldn't be on Suboxone because you may negate the ketamine's effect. You can be on anything and everything while you're in PR-TMS. Now, if you're actively abusing or if you're actively trying to get off Suboxone, obviously it's going to slow the treatment down because it's sort of like a salmon swimming upstream. It's like, this is slowing down. We're trying to speed your brain up. And so it's going to be like a little dance for a while. But after a while, you start feeling better. You're using less and less. Treatment is going to progress more quickly. And so there are so many things that PR-TMS can treat, and there are so many fewer contraindications to getting the treatment. So there's less of a hurdle. And, in a lot of hospital spaces, there's like a 3 to 6 month waiting list, not just to see a psychiatrist, but to once they've diagnosed you with treatment-resistant depression and thrown every medication in the book at you in a few months and a few months and a few months, after they decided that you need TMS, there's another 6 month waiting list. We can get
that's not even the good stuff.
I know, right? We can get you in 2 weeks. We can get you started in 2 weeks.
Wow. Now, one of the things I remember when we first had our coffee conversation the other day, you had mentioned something also about migraines.
Yes.
Because that's a very common affliction amongst a lot of people, and you guys have seen some really good effects for that as well, right? And it's basically just doing I don't exactly understand how a migraine works. Is it an overstimulated part of the brain that's kind of going crazy, or how does this treatment help migraines? So
there's actually a migraine pattern on EEG that you can see. And so it's a lot of noise in the temporal lobe area. And so we can clean up the noise a bit.
Wow. That's just blows me away.
I know, it's literally mind-blowing.
Oh my gosh.
It is the coolest. It is the coolest.
Oh. I just don't even know what to think. It's so interesting.
It's like sci-fi.
It really does.
It really, yeah.
It really feels like, to give a really bad term for what this is, it feels like biohacking. It feels like you're going in there, changing the way your brain works, and you're coming out awesome on the other side.
So if you came to me and you had a history of treatment-resistant depression and you were just like, I want to do psychotherapy and medication management. So you come to me, we'll schedule an appointment. I'll spend 90 minutes with you and do your history and talk about what's worked for you, what's not, if you've ever been hospitalized, suicidality, if you had any psychotic symptoms, all the things, get the whole shebang. If you come in for PR-TMS, I kind of like to freak people out because it's fun to see this. So my nurse practitioner will get a very basic history, but I don't want to know anything about the person except for their name, their age, and their sex. Mm-hmm. Am I talking to Mr. or Mrs. Who's he, what's it's of 56 years old?
Because then you look at that EEG.
And then I look at the EEG. I read the EEG in real time with them. And I say, nice to meet you, Mr. Smith. I'm Dr. Anderson. I'm so glad that you're here. I want to know everything about you. I want to know all your history. But first, I want to tell you what your brain is telling me.
Interesting.
And I say, it looks like you had a concussion however long ago, and part of your brain is going this speed, which is an excellent speed for your age, but part of your brain is going way, way, way slower. So you might have noticed some problems with attention to detail, concentration, decision-making, short-term memory loss. And they're like, and it looks like you haven't slept well in several years. Now, the EEG can't tell me if it's quality or quantity. It just says it's crappy sleep. And they're like, And it looks like you don't have great night vision, and there's some ringing in your right ear, and maybe migraine or headache. And they're just like, And they're like, am I being punked? Like, what's happening here? Like, for reals. Because that's the level of detail those different patterns can show.
Oh, wow. Wow.
It is the coolest.
Crazy.
It is the coolest. Yeah.
So for people who are interested in doing something like this,
yes,
they want to come to you. They don't have to have the diagnosis of treatment-resistant depression, I think is what you called it.
Correct.
They can just come and say, I want to work on myself.
Yeah, I feel like I'm slowing down as I'm getting older. I feel like my memory isn't what it was, or I was an alcoholic in my 20s and I've been sober for 30 years, but I still feel like I'm slower than I used to be, or I'm more forgetful and my mom had Alzheimer's and I don't want it, or I'm a CEO and the stress is getting to me, or I'm a busy mom and I feel easily overwhelmed. I don't want to snap at my kids anymore. You don't have to have like a diagnosis of I'm getting ready to die, right?
Yeah.
To come to see me. You can just want to tune your brain. You could have the nicest car in the world. You could have a really nice Lamborghini, but if you never gas it up and you never take it to get an oil change and you run it across country at 200 miles an hour, it's going to break down.
Yeah.
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 And especially if you've been running at 200 miles an hour for a very, very long
very long time. Yes. Yes, indeedy.
Oh my gosh. Well, man, I could ask a bunch more questions, but we're running out of time. So
sure.
I would love for you to give your pitch. So that's your camera right there.
Absolutely.
Tell people how they can connect with you, how they can learn more, and also tell them about your podcast. Because I want, before we actually do that, tell people about your podcast. Because I think if anyone is interested in learning more about what she's been talking about today, I want you guys to go check out her podcast and listen more. Because you guys have been doing everything from kind of some of the stuff that you guys do for treatment, but also just general good life advice on how to do things healthier.
Yeah. So my podcast is called Psych Waves, Psych Space Waves. And initially it started out as sort of like a way to educate our patients on ketamine and psychotherapy and medication management and PR-TMS, because there's a lot of fun things to talk about with PR-TMS, right? But over time it sort of evolved into, there are questions that I get almost on the daily about the same things over and over again. How do I set good boundaries in relationships? And how do I know when my friend's a narcissist? And how to deal with a negative Nancy in your friend group? And I should actually talk about these things too, because these are questions that I continually get over and over again. And so just basic coping skills. And if something is sort of appearing in the news, or the latest, greatest treatment that's out there, we kind of review stuff and kind of talk about what's been in the news lately and that sort of thing too. And so we do a little bit of everything, but we try to
Psych Waves.
That's awesome. It's on Spotify and Apple.
Awesome. All right. Go ahead. Give your pitch. Tell them who you are, how they can get in contact with you.
So I'm Dr. Teresa Anderson of the Anderson Clinic in Cincinnati, Ohio. If you like what you heard on the podcast, feel free to give us a call directly at 513-321-1753. You can also locate us online at www.andersonclinic.net. And if you're interested in more content, feel free to check us out on Psych Waves on Spotify and Apple.
Awesome. Dr. Anderson, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. And I hope everyone listening recognizes that this is such a value add to who they are as a person.
Absolutely.
Something like this. And so I just hope that you just get so busy that you can't take anyone anymore. Like, good luck.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for listening to the Cincinnati Business Podcast. If you're a business owner, a nonprofit, or you're just a subject matter expert and you want to be on the show, reach out to me at brian@cincinnatipodcaststudio.com. And we're so generously hosted inside of the Cincinnati Podcast Studio. And if you're looking to create or build or even upgrade your current podcast, reach out to us today. Schedule a time at cincinnatipodcaststudio.com/tour.